My wife betrayed me by secretly selling our family home, worth $450, $0, to her sister for $50, $0, and then stole $200, $0 from our joint account. Now we're in a bitter legal battle over custody and who gets what, and I can't believe how far she went. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this, but here I am. You know those moments in life where everything seems fine, and then suddenly, bam, you're hit with something so shocking it rewires your entire perspective. That's exactly what happened to me. My wife Emily had always been a bit of a diva, demanding, bitchy, quick to lie, but I never expected her to go this far. I mean, I knew she was manipulative, but I thought she loved me. Turns out she was just using me as a backup plan. It all started a few months ago when I noticed she was acting strangely distant. She'd come home late, get defensive if I asked questions, and I caught her deleting texts on her phone more often than usual. Nothing obvious, but enough to make me suspicious. I'd been with her for over 10 years, so I thought I knew her pretty well, but her lies started piling up. She'd tell me she was working late or meeting friends, but I'd find out she was actually out with some guy from her office, Jake, a guy I'd never even heard of before. The real bombshell hit when I decided to look through our joint bank account after she went out one night. I had a gut feeling she was hiding something, and I was right. I saw a series of transactions that made my stomach turn. She transferred thousands of dollars into a separate account, claiming she was investing or saving for something special. But what she was really doing was funneling money into an account she'd set up just for her side hustle, selling our family home. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Our house, the one I poured my soul into fixing up for the last 5 years, was gone. Sold to her sister, Lisa, for only 50 grand. What the hell? The house was worth around $450, $0. How could she do that? And the worst part, she forged my signature on the paperwork. I felt like I'd been hit with a freight train. My mind raced trying to process how someone I trusted could betray me so completely. Then I found out she also stolen a huge chunk of money, about 200 grand from our joint account. I mean, she cleaned us out. All the savings we'd built gone. She told me she needed the money for emergencies, but I knew better. I knew she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. And when I confronted her about it, she just shrugged, rolled her eyes, and called me paranoid, said I was overreacting, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. I'd worked my ass off to give us a good life, and she'd been secretly screwing everything up behind my back. I kept thinking about all the late nights I spent fixing things around the house, all the plans we made for our future. All gone because she decided she wanted a new life, without me. It felt like my entire world was collapsing, and I didn't even know where to start picking up the pieces. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with it, but I also felt so betrayed. So stupid for trusting her all these years. I kept replaying our last conversation, her bitchy tone, her lies, her dismissiveness. It was like she didn't even care what she'd done, just brushed it off like it was nothing. That's when I decided I'd fight back. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me, not anymore. Not after everything she'd done. After I found out about the house and the money, I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was get a lawyer. I didn't want to jump into anything without knowing my rights, but I also couldn't sit around and let her keep lying. I started gathering all the evidence I could, bank statements, legal documents, emails, texts. I wanted everything in case this turned into a fight in court. Meanwhile, Emily kept acting like everything was fine. She'd throw tantrums if I brought up the house or the money, calling me paranoid or insecure. She'd even lie outright, saying she never sold the house and that I was making it all up. But I had the proof, screenshots of the bank transfers, copies of the fake signatures, the legal papers showing her transfer of ownership to her sister. I kept quiet about some of the things I knew, just waiting for the right moment. I didn't want her to get wind of my plans. One night I decided to confront her directly. I wanted to hear her lie to my face. I told her I knew she'd been selling the house secretly, that I had evidence. Her reaction was classic Emily, defensive, bitchy, full of lies. She said she'd only been trying to keep things afloat, that the house was a burden and she wanted to do something for herself. She spun a story about how she was saving us, that I didn't understand her needs, but I wasn't buying it. I knew she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. That confrontation was a mess. She yelled, called me controlling, accused me of spying on her, told me I was overreacting. But I wasn't backing down. I told her I was going to take her to court, that I wasn't going to let her get away with stealing from us. Her face turned red with rage, and she threw a glass at the wall. That was the moment I realized I was dealing with someone who had no limits. She was willing to burn everything down just to get what she wanted. The emotional toll hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this to me, to us? I'd always thought she was ambitious but loyal. Turns out, she was just using me as a backup plan while she chased her own greed. The shock of it all made me question everything: our marriage, my judgment, my sanity. I'd loved her, believed in us, and now I was left with nothing but a trail of lies and broken trust. The worst part was the feeling of helplessness. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all the signs? How did I not see this coming? And then I remembered all the times she acted secretive, the late nights she refused to talk about, the way she'd lie about small things and then escalate to bigger ones. It was like she was hiding a whole different life from me. That realization made me feel sick. I'd been so blind, so naive. Despite everything, I knew I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to fight for what was left: my house, my money, my dignity. I started to plan my next move. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, especially with her bitchy attitude and her constant lies. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. I was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling like I'd lost everything I worked for. I had to stand up for myself, no matter how much she tried to push me down. That's what I've realized. Sometimes you have to take control, even if it means ripping everything apart first. Once I had all my evidence and a solid plan, I didn't waste any more time. I contacted my lawyer again and started the legal process to get everything in order. The first step was filing for a temporary restraining order to prevent her from selling or transferring any more assets without approval. I also wanted to get full custody of our kids, something I knew would be a long, hard fight because Emily was already trying to spin things her way. While all of this was happening, Emily's attitude only got worse. She was bitchy, dismissive, and kept trying to gaslight me. She told me I was overreacting, that I was jealous and paranoid, that I was just trying to ruin her. But I had the receipts. I had her texts, her bank statements, the legal paperwork. I knew she'd been lying and scheming behind my back for months. Still, she kept denying everything, spinning stories about how she was doing what's best for the family, how she'd never sell the house without me knowing, and that I was just being paranoid and controlling. I couldn't stand her lying anymore. I started to see her true colors: bitchy, manipulative, selfish. She had no remorse, no shame, just a relentless need to cover her tracks and justify her greed. It was like talking to a wall of lies. Every time I pressed her on something, she'd shift the blame or throw a tantrum. Honestly, I'd never seen anyone so good at twisting the truth. It was infuriating. Meanwhile, the legal battle was heating up. My lawyer advised me to prepare for a long fight over the house, the money, and custody. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go, selling our family home to her sister for 50 grand. Stealing hundreds of thousands from us, all while pretending she was the innocent victim. Her sister Lisa, by the way, was just as complicit. She bought the house knowing full well it was our family's home, and she paid her sister a fraction of its worth. I was furious. How could they do this? How could she betray her own family like that? The emotional toll was enormous. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry every day. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I was so blind to her true nature. I'd always thought Emily was ambitious but loving. Turns out she was just a selfish bitch who wanted everything her way, no matter who she hurt. I couldn't believe I'd been so naive. I'd given her everything: my time, my trust, my love, and she'd repaid me by stabbing me in the back. One night, after a particularly intense meeting with my lawyer, I sat alone in my apartment. I looked at the mess around me, The empty walls, the unpaid bills, the photos of us happy once. It all felt like a lifetime ago. I realized I had two choices. I could keep fighting and hope to get some justice, or I could accept that I'd lost a lot but still had my integrity. The anger and pain kept boiling inside me, but I knew I couldn't let her win completely. I had to stay strong for myself and for my kids. That's when I decided I'd do whatever it takes to rebuild. I might have lost the house, the savings, and a lot of trust, but I wasn't going to lose myself. This betrayal had opened my eyes to who Emily really was: selfish, manipulative, and willing to tear everything apart for her own greed. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt like hell, but I also knew I'd come out of this stronger. I've learned that sometimes people show you who they really are only when they think they can get away with it. My job now is to pick up the pieces and move forward, no matter how bitter or unfair it feels. The legal battle dragged on longer than I ever expected. Every day felt like a new assault on my sanity. Emily was relentless, bitchy, manipulative, and constantly trying to undermine me. She'd show up at court dressed to the nines, throwing tantrums. If things didn't go her way, she lied on the stand, twisting facts, claiming I was abusive, controlling, and that she was just trying to protect herself and the kids from my supposed outbursts. It was a circus, honestly. Meanwhile, she kept up her act at home, acting sweet and innocent when she needed to, then turning around and throwing fits when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd call me every name in the book, accuse me of trying to ruin her reputation, and insist that I was the one who was crazy. She told everyone I was a terrible husband, that I'd been emotionally abusive, and that I was just jealous of her success that, frankly, she stole from us. I remember one particular day in court when she sat there, smirking, and claimed she was the victim of my controlling behavior. I was seething. I had all the evidence, texts, emails, bank statements, that proved she'd been secretly selling the house and stealing money. I wanted to shout to expose her lies, but I kept my composure. I knew if I lost my temper, she'd use it against me. Instead, I let my lawyer do most of the talking and just sat there, feeling like I was drowning in her bullshit. The worst part was watching her manipulate the situation, trying to turn the court against me. She'd cry, act fragile, and say she was doing everything for the kids' best interests. But I knew the truth. She was only thinking about herself. That's what made me so angry: her blatant selfishness, her complete disregard for the damage she was causing. Throughout this process, I also had to deal with the fallout of losing our home and savings. The house was gone, sold to her sister for a fraction of its value. The money was gone, stolen from our joint account. I was left with nothing but a pile of legal bills and a broken heart. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut every time I saw how she was still trying to manipulate everyone around her, spinning her lies. I'll admit, some days I felt hopeless. How do you rebuild after something like this? How do you trust anyone again? The betrayal cut so deep. I had poured so much into that marriage, into that house, into our family, only to have her steal it all away. I looked at her during those court sessions, and all I saw was a bitchy, selfish woman who'd do anything to protect her own ass, no matter the cost. But amidst all this chaos, I started to realize something important. I couldn't change her. I could only control what I did. I decided I'd stop letting her manipulate me, stop letting her lies define me. I started focusing on my own healing, on protecting my kids from her toxicity, and on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew she'd keep throwing her tantrums, but I refused to let her win completely. I'd come too far to give up now, so I kept fighting. Every day I reminded myself that I deserved better, that I was more than her pawn in this game. I learned to stand my ground, even when she tried to push me down with her bitchy attitude and her lies. I also realized I had to be patient. Justice doesn't come overnight, and sometimes the worst betrayals take years to fully process. But I was determined to come out of this stronger, even if it took everything I had. The months went by and the legal fight finally started to wind down, but the emotional toll only deepened. I'd lost so much: the house, the savings, my sense of stability, and Emily's constant bitchiness and manipulations made it even harder to keep my head clear. Every time I thought I might get a break, she'd throw another curveball, accusing me of trying to ruin her, claiming I was the one with the secret affairs or that I was emotionally abusive. It was exhausting. What really pushed me over the edge was when she secretly sold the house to her sister for only 50 grand. I found out from the legal documents that she'd forged my signature again, transferring ownership without my consent. The house, which I'd worked so hard to fix up, was gone, snatched away like it was nothing. And she did it all behind my back, lying through her teeth about her good intentions. She kept insisting she was doing what was best for everyone, but I saw through her bullshit. She was just greedy and selfish. At that point, I decided I'd had enough. I told my lawyer I wanted full custody of the kids, enough of her using her bitchy attitude and lies to manipulate the situation. I wanted to protect them from her toxicity. The court hearing was a nightmare. Emily showed up dressed to impress, crying crocodile tears, claiming she was the victim of my abuse and that I was a terrible father. Her lies were so blatant I almost couldn't believe she had the nerve. But I had the evidence, texts, emails, witness statements, and I laid it all out. In the end, I got custody of the kids. It wasn't easy, and Emily wasn't happy about it, but the court saw through her bullshit. She threw a fit, screaming and calling me all kinds of names in front of everyone. She accused me of trying to keep the kids away from her, but the truth was, I just wanted to keep them safe from her manipulative, bitchy attitude. I knew I could give them a more stable life, free from her lies and greed. Once all of that was settled, I finally took a step back. I looked at what I'd lost and what I'd gained. Sure, I was still angry about the betrayal, still hurt by her lies, but I also realized I'd come out of this with a clearer sense of who I am. I learned that sometimes people reveal their true selves only when they're pushed to the limit. Emily's bitchiness, her lies, her greed, those were her real colors, and I had to accept that I'd been blind for too long. Now I'm focusing on rebuilding. I've started saving again, working on my mental health, and trying to forget the worst parts of this nightmare. The experience has taught me a lot about trust, betrayal, and resilience. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I can move forward. I don't want to be bitter forever, just smarter. If I could give anyone advice from this mess, it's this: trust is fragile, watch for the signs. Don't ignore the red flags no matter how much you love someone. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because if you don't, you might end up losing everything just like I did. But even after all this, I still believe in the possibility of a better life. I just know now that I have to fight for it myself. Looking back, I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this, but here I am. The betrayal was so deep, so calculated, that it changed me forever. Emily, my wife, turned out to be someone I didn't even recognize: bitchy, manipulative, and utterly selfish. She sold our family home to her sister for a fraction of its worth, secretly stole hundreds of thousands from our joint account, and then tried to spin it all as her doing what was best for the family. I still can't wrap my head around how far she went. The court battles, the lies, the endless manipulations, they drained me physically, emotionally, and financially. I lost my house, my savings, and most painfully, my trust. But I also learned something invaluable: how to stand up for myself, how to recognize red flags early, and most importantly, how to protect what's mine. I realized that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the worst betrayals, and you have to be prepared for that. I won custody of my kids, which was the only thing that kept me going through all the chaos. Watching Emily tantrum and lie in court made me realize how much her bitchy attitude and greed had warped her sense of reality. I see now that her selfishness was the root of all her actions. She's still out there, probably trying to manipulate others, but I've learned not to let her get under my skin anymore. I've become better at reading people, at trusting my instincts. Most importantly, I've come to understand that life goes on. Even after losing everything I thought mattered, I'm still standing. I've started over, focusing on rebuilding my life, saving money, working on my mental health, and trying to forget the worst of what she did. The pain of betrayal doesn't disappear overnight, but it teaches you resilience. It teaches you to value yourself enough to walk away from toxic people. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: Never ignore the signs. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. Be honest with yourself about what you see in others. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because if you don't, you risk losing everything you hold dear. I've learned that forgiveness isn't for her, it's for myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the betrayal. It means letting go of the anger and pain so I can move forward. I hope everyone reading this finds the strength to do the same someday. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning how to survive it, how to rise from the ashes, and how to keep going, even when everything seems lost.